I grew up in a pretty standard family, just me and my folks, living in a small, cozy house at the edge of town. My dad worked the late shifts at the factory, and my mom was a cashier at the local grocery store. Money was tight, but we got by. I was their only kid, and they poured all their love into me, even though I wasn't the easiest child to care for. From a young age, I was always the sickly one, catching colds that seemed to linger for weeks and struggling with a bunch of allergies that kept me indoors more than out. I was thin, way too thin for my age, and my clothes? Well, let's just say fashion was the least of our concerns. School was a battlefield. I tried to blend into the background, but somehow, I always stood out, and not in a good way. My classmate, Sarah, she made sure of that. Sarah was everything I wasn't: popular, pretty, and always dressed like she was about to walk into a photo shoot. One day, trying to dodge the bullies, I was late to class. Slipping into my seat, I hoped for a quiet day. That hope vanished the moment Sarah noticed me. "Look who decided to show up," Sarah sneered, loud enough for the whole class to hear. "Thought you were too sick to come to school, or did you finally find something to wear that didn't come from a charity bin?" Her friends laughed, echoing her cruelty. I wanted to disappear, but there was nowhere to hide. I kept my eyes down, whispering, "Just leave me alone, Sarah." "What was that?" she mocked, stepping closer. "Can't hear you. Speak up." Before I could muster a response, Mr. Jenkins, our math teacher, entered the room, cutting off whatever Sarah had planned next. The rest of the day, I kept to myself, speaking only when spoken to, and even then, my words were barely above a whisper. At home, things were different. It was my safe haven. My parents, seeing my downcast eyes at dinner, exchanged worried glances. "Nellie, honey, you barely touched your food." "Something happened at school today?" my mom asked, her voice full of concern. I shrugged, pushing my food around my plate. "It's nothing. Just tired, I guess." My dad, quiet until now, put down his fork. "You know, Nellie, you can talk to us. Whatever it is, we're here for you." I nodded, knowing they meant every word. But explaining the day's humiliation felt impossible. "Thanks, Dad. I'm just really tired. Think I'll head to bed early." Dragging my feet towards the school gates, I braced myself for another day of dodging glares and whispered insults. My backpack felt like it weighed a ton, loaded with textbooks and the heavy dread of facing Sarah and her clique. As I navigated the crowded hallways, trying my best to become invisible, I heard the all-too-familiar voice that made my stomach twist in knots. "Hey, ghost girl, try not to vanish before class starts," sneered Mark, one of Sarah's loyal sidekicks. His nickname for me, a jab at my pale complexion and tendency to keep to myself, echoed off the lockers, drawing snickers from nearby students. I quickened my pace, not daring to look up. "Just ignore him," I muttered to myself, but the words felt hollow. The day's first challenge was surviving homeroom. Mrs. Parker, ever oblivious, droned on about the importance of attendance just as I slipped into my seat at the back. I barely settled in when Sarah, draped in her latest fashionable outfit, sauntered in, her entourage in tow. "Nice of you to join us, Nellie. We were worried you got lost in your closet of hand-me-downs," Sarah quipped loudly, tossing her hair as she passed my desk. A chorus of laughter followed. I clenched my fists, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. "Just leave me alone," I shot back quietly, more to my desk than to her. "What was that, Nellie?" "Speak up, we can't hear you," Sarah taunted, turning to face me with a smirk. I shook my head, choosing silence over a battle I couldn't win. The bell rang, a temporary reprieve, but the relief was short-lived. Each class transition felt like running a gauntlet, with Sarah and her crew lying in wait to hurl their next insult or snide comment. Lunchtime was no sanctuary either. I found a secluded spot under an old oak tree, a safe distance from the cafeteria's chaos and cruelty. As I nibbled on my sandwich, thoughts of just disappearing consumed me. "Hey, why you sitting all by yourself here?" a voice interrupted my solitude. I looked up to see Jake, a guy from my English class. He wasn't one of Sarah's crowd, but I was wary all the same. "Just like the quiet," I replied, hoping he'd take the hint and leave me be. He shrugged, unfazed, and sat down beside me. "Suit yourself. Sarah's being a real piece of work, huh?" I was taken aback by his bluntness. "You could say that," I admitted, surprised by my own candor. "Listen, Nellie, you can't let her get to you." "She's all talk," Jake said, his tone earnest. I wanted to believe him, to find the strength to stand up to Sarah, but the words felt like a distant dream. "Easier said than done," I mumbled, my gaze fixed on the grass below. The bell, signaling the end of lunch, snapped me out of my reverie. Gathering my things, I offered Jake a small smile. "Thanks for, sitting with me." "No problem. See you around, Nellie," he said, heading back to the building. The rest of the day passed in a blur. With each class, I counted down the minutes until I could escape back to the safety of my home. But the day wasn't without its lessons. Jake's unexpected kindness was a glimmer of hope, a reminder that not everyone was against me. School had become a nightmare for me, one I couldn't wake up from. Every day was a repeat of the last, dodging insults, hiding from Sarah and her gang, and trying, unsuccessfully, to blend into the background. It wasn't long before the stress of it all started to take a real toll on me. I found myself feeling physically sick, my old ailments flaring up with a vengeance alongside new ones. Headaches, stomach aches, you name it, I had it. I was a mess, inside and out. One evening, I was curled up on the sofa, a blanket wrapped around me, trying to shake off the latest in a long line of migraines when Grandma came over. She had this way of seeing right through you, and that day was no different. "Nellie, this isn't just about being sick, is it?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. I tried to shrug it off. "I'm fine, Grandma. Just tired." She wasn't having any of it. "Nonsense. You're sick, yes, but it's not just physical, is it? It's those kids at school, isn't it?" I hesitated, then the floodgates opened. I told her everything about Sarah, the bullying, the constant dread that filled my days. Grandma listened, her expression growing more concerned by the minute. When I finished, she sighed deeply. "Nellie, your body is reacting to your stress and anxiety. It's making you ill. All these problems with your classmates are affecting your health." I was stunned. Could my being bullied be the reason I was always sick? Seeing my confusion, Grandma explained further. "Stress can have a real, physical impact on your body. It's important we address not just the symptoms, but the cause as well." The next day, Grandma sat down with my parents and me to discuss a plan. It was clear that continuing to attend school wasn't an option, not if things stayed as they were. After much discussion, my parents decided to switch me to distance learning. It was a big change, but one that felt necessary. The difference was night and day. Away from the constant harassment and anxiety, I started to heal. My headaches became less frequent, my stomach settled, and I found myself actually able to concentrate on my studies without the looming shadow of Sarah and her taunts. I was sitting at the kitchen table one afternoon, working through a set of math problems, when Mom came in to make a cup of tea. She watched me for a moment, then said, "You seem different, Nellie. Better. Happier, even." I hadn't really thought about it, but she was right. "I guess I am," I admitted. "It's weird not having to worry about what's going to happen at school every day." Mom nodded, a relieved smile spreading across her face. "I'm just glad to see you feeling better. We should have done this sooner." The transition wasn't without its challenges. I missed the few friends I had, and adjusting to a new way of learning took time. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, I found myself grateful for the change. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. One morning, as I logged onto my first virtual class, my mom knocked softly on my door. "Nellie, you okay with this? Missing your friends?" she asked, peeking in with a concerned look. I paused, considering. Kinda, I admitted. But it's better than before. At least I can focus now. She nodded, her eyes softening. You just shout if you need anything, okay? I'm right downstairs. As the days turned into weeks, I found a rhythm to my new routine. The subjects I used to struggle with began to make sense, thanks to the absence of distractions and the patient guidance of my online teachers. One afternoon, after a particularly successful math session, my dad came home early and found me at my desk. Look at you, assing your classes without those bullies breathing down your neck, he said with a grin, ruffling my hair. I couldn't help but smile back. Feels weird, Dad. Good weird, though. Like, I can actually do this. That's 'cause you can, Nellie. Always could, he replied, pride evident in his voice. Yet, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The lack of social interaction began to weigh on me. I missed the face-to-face conversations, even the ones that weren't always kind. The silence of the house, once a sanctuary, started to feel more like a cage. I started to look for ways to fill the social void. I joined online study groups and even started a virtual book club with a few classmates I'd reconnected with. It wasn't the same as hanging out in person, but it helped. One evening, as I closed my laptop after a long study session, my grandma called. How's my favorite granddaughter? She asked, her voice warm and comforting. I'm your only granddaughter, Grandma, I teased, smiling at our ongoing joke. Details, she chuckled. How's the distance learning going? It's good, actually. I mean, I miss seeing people, but I'm doing better in school now, I shared, feeling a sense of achievement. That's my girl. You're stronger than you know, Nellie. Don't forget that, she said, her words lifting my spirits. Prom night was something I had dreaded for months. The very idea of attending filled me with anxiety. My parents, however, thought it would be good for me, a chance to close this chapter on a high note, as they put it. Despite my protests, I found myself nodding along to their encouragement. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, Nellie. You might regret not going, Mom said, her eyes hopeful. I couldn't bring myself to argue further, even though every fiber of my being screamed against it. So, there I was, in a simple dress that my mom and I had picked out, standing awkwardly at the back of the gym, trying my best to blend in with the walls. The gym was transformed, barely recognizable, with all the decorations and lights. Groups of my classmates, all dressed up, were laughing and dancing, enjoying the night. I couldn't help but feel like an outsider, watching the festivities from my lonely corner. As the evening dragged on, I decided to make a quiet exit. No one would notice I was gone anyway. But just as I was about to slip out, Sarah, in her stunning dress, blocked my path. Leaving so soon, Nellie? The party's just starting, she sneered, her voice dripping with malice. I tried to step around her, but she shoved me back, a little too forcefully. Watch where you're going, she hissed, her eyes gleaming with cruelty. The sudden push caught me off guard, and I stumbled, drawing the attention of those nearby. In seconds, I was surrounded by Sarah's friends, their laughter piercing the loud music. Look at her, can barely stand straight, one of them mocked, pointing directly at me. Sarah leaned in closer, her voice loud enough for her circle to hear. Guess some things never change, huh, Nellie? Always the clumsy one. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment and something else, anger, maybe, or just a deep, aching sadness. Just leave me alone, Sarah, I managed to say, my voice shaky, but loud. Oh, I will, don't worry. Wouldn't want to ruin my night by spending another minute with you, she retorted, her words like daggers. The group's laughter followed me as I turned and ran, not stopping until I was safely outside, away from their taunting faces. Tears blurred my vision as I made my way home, the night air doing little to cool my flushed cheeks. My parents were waiting up when I got home, their faces lighting up at the sight of me. But as they took in my tear-streaked face and the defeated slump of my shoulders, their smiles faded. "What happened, honey?" Mom asked, rushing over to me. I shook my head, unable to find the words to explain the humiliation and hurt. "I just want to forget tonight ever happened," I whispered, the tears starting again as I let my parents wrap me in their arms, their concern and love a small comfort in the face of my pain. After the prom disaster, I was more than ready to put high school behind me. College was my chance to start fresh, to be someone new. I chose to study medicine, driven by a deep-seated desire to help others, maybe even understand a bit more about my own struggles through learning about the human body and mind. My first day at medical college felt like stepping onto another planet. Everyone was buzzing with excitement, talking about classes and future careers. I found myself outside the main lecture hall, clutching my schedule, when a girl next to me said, "Hey, you look lost too. First year?" "Yeah," I replied, grateful for the conversation. "Nellie," I introduced myself. "I'm Zoe. Nervous?" "Terrified," I admitted with a laugh. Zoe and I stuck together, finding our way to the lecture hall. Sitting down, I felt a nervous excitement bubble up inside me. This was it, my chance to really make something of myself. As weeks turned into months, I started to come into my own. I was doing well in my classes, even making a few friends. Zoe and I became inseparable, studying together and encouraging each other through the tough exams and endless assignments. Our hard work paid off, and I found myself thriving in a way I never had before. The subject of psychosomatic medicine particularly fascinated me, the idea that the mind could have such a profound effect on the body. It resonated with my own experiences, and I dove into the research with a passion. One day, after presenting a paper I'd written on stress and its physical manifestations, my professor pulled me aside. "Nellie, your work is impressive. Have you considered specializing in this field?" I was taken aback. I hadn't really thought about it. He nodded thoughtfully. "Think about it. You have a knack for understanding the complexities of the human mind and body. It's a rare gift." His encouragement bolstered my confidence, and I began to see a clear path ahead of me. I was going to use my past, my struggles, and turn them into something positive. I was going to help people heal, not just physically but emotionally too. As the years passed, I graduated from medical college with honors, my sights set on specializing in psychosomatic medicine. My family was proud, and I, for the first time in a long time, was proud of myself too. I had turned my life around, and I was ready to face whatever came next with a newfound strength and determination. Zoe hugged me tight on graduation day. "Look at us, we made it." "Yeah, we did," I said, smiling. "Here's to new beginnings." And as we threw our caps into the air, I felt a sense of closure. The hurt and isolation of my past were behind me. Ahead lay a future full of possibilities, a chance to make a real difference. And I was ready for it, more ready than I'd ever been. After pouring years into researching the profound effects of psycho-emotional stress on the body, my work started gaining traction. I'd written extensively on how the turmoil of our minds could physically manifest, leading to real, often severe health issues. Stress, anxiety, the grind of daily life, it all could lead to negative reactions within the body, spiraling into chronic conditions. What fascinated me most was finding ways to reverse or manage these effects, by addressing the root, the mind state. This journey of mine caught the eyes and ears of the medical community. Invitations flooded in, asking me to share my findings with peers, specialists, and even skeptics. It wasn't long before my name became somewhat of a buzzword in medical circles, a symbol of a fresh perspective on holistic healing. My big break came when I was invited as a speaker at the annual health conference. The topic I chose, the mind-body connection, psycho-emotional stress and physical health, struck a chord. As I spoke, I could see the realization dawn on many faces. This wasn't just theory, it was reality affecting countless lives. I walked off that stage to a sea of applause, my heart racing not from fear, but exhilaration. I'd overcome my dread of public speaking, facing down an auditorium packed with professionals, and I'd held my own. The buzz from my presentation didn't just end with applause. Post-conference, an invitation came my way that would have seemed unimaginable years ago, a dinner with the who's who of the health sector. Government officials, insurance bigwigs, clinic heads, and industry specialists, all were to be there. As the day of the dinner approached, a mix of excitement and nerves took over. This was more than just a meal, it was a networking goldmine, a chance to discuss potential collaborations, to take my work to the next level. I stood in front of my mirror, makeup in hand, determined to look my best. I wasn't just representing my research, I was representing myself, my journey. I chose my dress carefully, the one that always made me feel confident and at ease. As I applied my makeup, I allowed myself a moment to reflect on the significance of this evening. It wasn't about looking no worse than the other women there, it was about feeling my best, about walking into that restaurant with my head held high, knowing I belonged. At this elegant dinner, surrounded by the health sector's elite, I felt like I was finally where I belonged. Compliments flowed my way, each one boosting my confidence more than the last. As the evening wound down, I decided it was time to head home, still riding the high of the night's successes. But as I made my way through the hallway, a familiar voice stopped me in my tracks. It was her, Sarah, my high school nightmare. "Wow, look at you. Finally figured out how to dress, huh?" Sarah's voice, laced with that same condescending tone, filled the space between us. I turned to face her, finding her just as beautiful and just as arrogant as she'd been back in school. The years had changed us both, but it seemed her spirit remained untouched by time. "Long time no see, Sarah," I said calmly. Sarah laughed, a sound that once would have sent me spiraling into anxiety. "Seriously, though, how much did you have to borrow to afford a night here? This place isn't cheap." I met her gaze, steady and calm. The fear and insecurity she once inspired in me had long since faded, replaced by a strength forged in overcoming and succeeding, despite people like her. Before I could respond, the organizer of the dinner, Mr. Thompson, approached, his concern evident. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, looking from me to Sarah. I nodded, offering him a smile. "Yes, thank you. Just catching up with an old classmate." Sarah, fueled by alcohol and unchecked pride, continued her tirade, oblivious to the discomfort she was causing. She even went as far as to bring her husband into the mix, beckoning him over with the promise of joining in on her mockery. However, the moment her husband, who I recognized as the director of a company interested in my research, realized the situation, his demeanor changed drastically. "I'm so sorry," he began, his apology directed at me with a sincerity that took me by surprise. "My wife's behavior is unacceptable." He then turned to Sarah, his frustration boiling over. "Do you realize what you've done? You're jeopardizing important opportunities with your behavior. I've been looking forward to collaborating with Dr. Nellie Stewart here, and you're here making a scene." The sight of him leading Sarah away, her protests echoing down the hallway, was surreal. Moments later, he returned alone, his expression apologetic. "I can't tell you how sorry I am for my wife's behavior," he said, his voice earnest. "I hope this doesn't affect our potential collaboration. Your work is invaluable." After the dinner, as I was leaving, I saw her, my former tormentor from school, sitting outside on the steps, her makeup smudged from tears. She looked up as I approached, her eyes red and puffy. "Hey, can you talk to him for me? You seem to have his ear," she hiccuped, her voice a mix of desperation and vodka. I paused, looking down at her. This was the girl who made my life a living hell back in the day, now asking for my help. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I'm not getting involved," I said firmly. "This is between you and him." "But you're like, doing so well." "He listens to you," she persisted, stumbling over her words. "That doesn't make it my business," I replied, my tone leaving no room for further discussion. I left her there, on the steps, a mess of her own making. Walking home, I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. I had come full circle, from the girl who was bullied to someone who stood her ground, unafraid. The news of her divorce came through the grapevine. I'd be lying if I said it didn't give me a sense of vindication. As for me, life was looking up. I had found someone, a man who appreciated me for who I was, someone kind and interesting. We were talking about a future together, something I never thought I'd have. Continuing my work, I felt more motivated than ever. My experiences, both past and present, fueled my passion and my resolve to make a difference. It was a strange journey, but it led me here, to a place of happiness and contentment. And for that, I was grateful.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.